I recommend that you stop reading this now. Don't say you weren't warned. When I was younger, I would always get scared watching horror films and reading horror stories, just like everyone else. But as I'm sure lots of other people will tell you, the real horror sets in after seeing the movie or reading the story. You just experienced a story with some monster, demon, or other force, probably one that kills people. The rest of the day, you are on your guard, especially at night. Every creak you hear, every flickering shadow, every slight sound in the darkness frightens you. When you are in bed at night, you hide under the covers and hope that you can just make it until morning, that the light of the sun will destroy any evil forces trying to harm you. When I was a kid, I would always try to stop my fear by thinking about one thing. Why would the monster attack me now? After I had seen a film or read a story, finding a monster's weakness or at least how to identify and escape from it, I would have an advantage over the thing. If it had ever wanted to get me, it would certainly have come before I heard about it. Many years ago, in my small town and other surrounding areas, several kids went missing. There was no evidence, not a single trace of anything that could tell where they had been taken to or what had taken them. However, one warm summer evening, a teenager, about my age, was admitted to the local hospital by his parents. They said he hadn't slept for days. The doctor recommended sedation, but the boy resisted violently. He said that it hunts you while you sleep, that it would get him. His parents and doctors questioned him about what it was. He refused to explain, warning that if he told the story, they would be next. After quite some time, the boy, exhausted, gave in and told them the same thing he had been told. For an unknown amount of time, years, perhaps decades, a monster has existed in this world. No one knows the original source of this thing, but it has been taking people ever since it first came into existence. It has attributes similar to some other monster stories. For example, it haunts your dreams. You dream that you are having a normal day, your normal routine, and then you see it, off in the distance somewhere, and it just stares at you. Yellow eyes, and a figure that you can't quite make out. The next time you dream, you are in an unfamiliar place, and it is very close to you now, and it begins to chase you. It is a large beast, with a menacing growl and those unmistakable yellow eyes. You try to escape, but it just keeps getting closer and closer. Then you wake up. There are no accounts of the third dream, because that is when it gets you. You disappear. You're gone. There's nothing more to it. Well, there is one more thing, the most important detail. It only starts to haunt your dreams once you have heard of it. Once you have read this story, there is no escape as soon as you finish this sentence. The next time you dream, you will see it, off in the distance. The boy soon disappeared, as did his parents and his doctor. I just recently heard this story from a friend of mine, a friend who is now gone. Soon I will be gone too. My old strategy of why now when I know what's coming will no longer work. It attacks when you know. One more dream and I will be gone. Before long, you'll be gone too. I've always lived a relatively normal life. I was the typical teenage girl, though I was a tomboy. I had never once been a girly girl or dreamed of holding frilly pom-poms and being popular. That just wasn't my style. I much preferred to stay in my house, sitting in front of the TV, playing video games. Horror video games, to be precise. Anything that could scare me, I went after. Though I loved the fear aspect of games and scary stories, I was easily paranoid. Thanks to this, I very seldom ever let myself feel safe. I was more so always in a state of hesitation, like a little mouse in a cat-infested home. My friends, family, all of them knew this wasn't healthy for me. No, not in the slightest. I didn't care about that though. Fear enticed me, drew me in. My paranoia only grew, and I let it. I watched it grow, like the little fire it was in my heart. As I lay in bed one night, reading more creepy scriptures, whatever I could come across really. Soon though, I had come to realize my throat felt dry and sore. I set down the laptop and started to try and massage it from the outside, rubbing slowly with 2 fingers, but to no avail. I knew I had to go from the barely lit living room and into the dark kitchen that lay beyond the safe haven I had grown so used to these nights. My paranoia naturally did not ease up, but I knew I had to go and get something to drink.
if only to ease the sore, dull burn I felt in my throat. With that, I slipped my legs over the side of the couch, flinching as my foot caught in the blanket I would sleep with. Thanks to my nearly tripping, my landing was not so quiet as I would have wished. I cursed under my breath but shook it off. Really, I needed to get over it. It was only me and my dad in this old house anyway. Heck, it wasn't even old, just a bit worn. Nothing to fear from a safe, warm family home. With that thought swimming in my mind, I made my journey to the kitchen, sure to flip on the lights the instant I entered the doorway. As I came to stand beside the fridge, I took a look to my left, looking over the blinds that covered the glass sliding doors. Despite the thick white blinds, I always felt something would be just outside the doors, able to see through some unnoticeable crack in the covering. The thought made chills run down my back, but I shrugged it off just as quick, turning my attention to the fresh bottle of water I had grabbed. Thanks to my prior thoughts, I knew it would be a long, sleepless night for me. The days that followed went by nearly the same. My father had gone fishing for most of the weekend daylight hours, and I stayed alone to read or play games, only getting up to use the bathroom or get some food or drink when I needed to. The nights, too, went generally the same. Dad would be upstairs asleep, and that's when it would always happen. My throat would sting, and I would go for water. And every time, my mind felt like it was being tugged, and I would always look at the blinds, sending yet another chill through my entire being. Each time, I felt like something knew I was in there, and it was waiting. Of course, I knew that was just me, imagining I had gone through what others had said they have done. Some creature, waiting to spring. It was all just fear, and natural fear. At least I hoped it was natural. The last thing I need is to be labeled crazy at such a young age. However, one night, about a week after this had all started to happen, when I walked into the kitchen, I realized one of the blinds was slightly ajar, moved to the point a bit of the night could be seen through the cover. Considering the fact I have 4 cats, all of which are known to cause mischief, I thought nothing of it. They had probably been chasing each other around, ran into the blinds, and ran off again. I now turned towards the blinds, ready to go and just fix it, before the all-too-familiar shiver coursed through me. I let out a weak whimper at the feeling, unable to contain it this time for whatever reason. Once the feeling had passed, I went to do as I had planned. Just as I settled the blind into place, however, I saw a pale, bony hand twitch from the darkness. It looked to be just outside the window pane, and I jolted back instantly with a strangled, startled cry. I stood there shaking for what seemed forever. Of course, my curious mind picked up, and I moved back to look. It was gone. Though my instincts told me to run, go, I shrugged the fear away. Odds are, it was just the reflection of the light in contrast to the night outside. Nothing was there, and I was getting worked up over nothing at all. I returned to the fridge for my nightly water before going back into the living room.
And that's when things started to go downhill. After that first encounter, I continued to see that pale, emaciated-looking hand, shaking, twitching, just outside the window pane from a barely opened hole in the blinds. Every night, I would hastily move the blinds back into place for fear of seeing more, for fear of it seeing me, as I have seen it. But I know it always saw me. Before I had even seen it, it would watch. Deep down, I knew this, but my subconscious refused to believe it. Oh, I wish I had believed it. One night, I sat in my father's recliner, typing up an email to my friend. However, I felt a disturbance. I wasn't sure what it was, but I felt it. A presence, if you will, just waiting to poke out and visit, it seemed. I looked away from the computer for only a moment, and that moment was enough. I saw the hand again. It reached out slowly from below the opening of the recliner. I felt paralyzed once I saw it, reaching for my outstretched legs, reaching, and then it touched me. The feeling was almost slimy, not what you would expect of such a human-looking hand. The nails of it just skimmed my skin, caressing. The paralysis ended as it reached down from my foot. I slammed down on the end of the recliner, hoping to God the emaciated thing would just die, would leave me alone. That it was as weak as the frail hand looked. From below me, I heard an inhuman screech of pain, but it was abruptly cut off as the chain closed in on itself. I sat, shaking for a few moments, waiting to feel something move. Nothing happened. I thought it was time to see just what had been under there. See its face. I moved slowly, hesitant with such a decision, but I knew it. It had to be done. I moved the leg of the chain carefully, almost as if I expected the hand to lash out at my face. I felt the warm substance on my hands, and knew then I was safe. However, when I had revealed what was under there, when the leg was up, I immediately drew my breath in. The smell of metallic blood hit my nose, and I started to dry heave at the sight. There was no pale white, emaciated creature. The dead and now nearly decapitated creature was my kitten, one of the twins I had adopted not long ago. Tears welled in my eyes as I continued to cough, almost begging to be sick, praying to everything and everyone that I was dreaming, that I hadn't done what was laying in front of me. But as I moved my hand forward to slowly touch the brown, wet fur, and I began to truly cry, it made me do this. And it was still alive, watching me, witnessing me pick up the small, limp body, probably pleased with what it had done. I felt it so close. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and the presence was gone. Instead, all I heard was the faint mumbling of what I presumed was my father's worried and upset voice. I could barely hear him over my own tears, over my own grief. I tried to live with myself after that incident, but it always got harder and harder. I could hear faint whisperings, always just out of clarity. I could understand what it was saying, though, or what it was meaning to say. It's your fault. You killed her. You killed your innocent little friend, your form of a child. She did nothing to you. Soon the grief became too much for me. The whispering, the sightings, all of it bore down on me too much. If I couldn't kill it, there was only one thing left to do. I lay down on the floor, below the open leg of the chair, reaching up to rest my hands on it, shaking, trembling with grief, fear, but now with a sense of finality. It would be over, and there would be no more paranoia or mental torture. I heard the noise of my father heading downstairs, and I knew then it was now or never. As I slammed down the best I could, feeling the sudden slice of metal on my throat, I could swear I felt a cold nail skim down my leg before blackness overtook every other sense. I was wrong. It wasn't over. My dad, he found me naturally. I knew he would. I heard him after all. He must have called for paramedics instantly. I don't know how I'm alive. I must have hesitated. Something stopped me. Something made me stop. The metal, it didn't kill me. It didn't pierce me how I wished it would, didn't cut far enough to kill me. I lost a lot of blood, though. It left me weak, vulnerable. I don't know how long I was asleep after that. When I had been awakened, I tried to speak, to tell someone why I did that, but I couldn't talk. All that came out was a terrible silence. I learned I had done too much damage. My voice would never return to me. Never would I be able to tell anyone what happened or what was torturing me so. Not like they would believe me anyway. I wonder now why it had saved me after leaving me to such a fate. But deep down, I already know. It wants me alive, to know of it yet not speak of it, to feel it but not cry out. Not only that, but to wallow in the grief it threw me into. To live as an unheard reminder that it is always watching from behind the covers. There are all kinds of shocking videos on the internet, showing people doing sick, disgusting, and horrific things. For some reason, people watch the videos and then post their reactions on YouTube. Perhaps you've heard of some of the shock videos. They usually have weird titles like 3 guys, 1 crowbar, 2 girls, 1 poop, and 1 man, 1 cactus. I've watched every one of them, but today I watched one video that is more disturbing than all of the rest put together. The title of the video is 1 Guy 2 Spoons. You're probably already wondering what it's about, but let me assure you, it's far more disgusting than anything you can think up. It shows a man using 2 spoons to pop out his eyeballs. Yes, that's right. He actually digs in behind his own eyeballs and pops them out of his head using the spoons. When I watched the video, I was so disturbed by it that I almost threw up. As sickening as the video was, I forced myself to watch it to the end. I wish I hadn't. Here's a good piece of advice for you. Be careful what you watch, because that which you see can never be unseen. When the video was over, I heard my mom calling me from downstairs, telling me that dinner was ready. I raced downstairs and took a seat at the kitchen table. My father was reading the newspaper. My mother was setting the table. "That's odd," my father remarked. "This article claims there's a new viral video going around on the internet. They say it's dangerous. Apparently it causes anyone who sees it to go insane and try to pop out their own eyeballs." My father broke off and looked up. "Oh my God!" my mother screamed. "Oh my God! What have you done?" But it was already too late. I could feel the spoons in my hands, but I couldn't see a thing. Crap. I've got exams tomorrow, I thought, and I'd promised myself I'd get a good night's sleep. Yet I'd woken up in the middle of the night for no reason, bloody sod's law. Ugh, what time is it anyway? I looked on the clock. It was 3:20. Right, that wasn't too bad, I suppose. I had about 4 more hours of sleep left. I tried to drop off again, but my brain just wouldn't settle back down. I closed my eyes tightly, laid on my back, chest, side, got into every position I could think of, but just could not get back to sleep. "Oh my God," I mumbled. "Is it really 4 o'clock already?" This was too much. I needed to be ready for my exams. Frustrated, I grabbed my iPod and set it to the lowest volume possible, so that the blue bar wasn't even visible. After all, I didn't want to wake everyone else in the house up. I connected to YouTube, searched relaxing music, and clicking on the first decent-looking thumbnail I saw, I placed the iPod on my pillow and put my ear over the speaker part of it. It started off nice enough, harps and violins playing softly, while a piano made a continuous, slightly repetitive tune. I was actually starting to sink back into a happy slumber once again. Just then I heard a noise. Barely anything. Just what sounded like a slight scratch on the wall. Any other time I would have taken no notice. But it was right at that moment I felt something. There was an overwhelming sense of evil filling the room, impossible to describe. A sensation of hell and hatred, what you would imagine Satan to be like, if that makes any sense. Although there was nothing to see, I could just feel this presence in my room, a presence of pure evil. I was still in a state of semi-consciousness, what I can only describe as somewhere between being asleep and awake. I still could not move. It was as if my mind was awake, but my body wasn't. I felt fear like no other time in my life, sheer terror and nothing else, engulfing me fully. Just as I was about to scream, I stopped. There was a hand coming round the door, followed by heavy, raspy breathing. Everything was dark and I could hardly see, but the hand I saw appeared to be that of a shadow, yet somehow it seemed to be made up of substance. It continued to wrap its fingers around the doorframe, and eventually it started to open the door. The figure standing before me was hazy in my half-opened eyes, in the blackness of the room, but it was definitely solid now, dark gray and draped in a long coat with a hood. I could not see a face, just long, tangled gray hair. But for whatever reason, I had named it and knew the gender. It was a hag. The hag. It sounds ridiculous, almost comical now I write it, but there was something in me which knew this. For some reason, it seemed obvious at the time. Again, I tried to scream, but as I did, she proceeded across my room and came towards me. The next few seconds I can't recall, but soon she was sitting on my chest with her hand around my neck. I felt like I was being suffocated. All I could hear was her breathing in my ear. She was whispering something I couldn't make out, but I knew it was something evil. I tried so desperately to move, concentrating all my energy, using every bit of my strength to move an ankle, a finger, anything. For I felt that if I were able to do that, I could defeat this demonic being. She was kneeling now, crouched down and hunched, crushing my ribs and compressing my lungs. Her hand was tightening its grip on my neck. I couldn't breathe, and I felt ready to die, thought I was dying. I started to have this internal conflict. I could not let myself be consumed by this evil. I didn't want it, yet there was nothing I could do to escape, but I couldn't let this happen. I would not be taken by it. But hope in life was being drained out of me. I had to win, though. If I could do even the smallest thing, then I was certain I was going to survive. Yet I thought, how could I? Suddenly, I saw a pair of eyes staring at me, glowing, emerging from behind the curtain that concealed my wardrobe. They were bright white, with no pupils. They seemed to belong to some strange, horse-like creature, and they protruded from his head like light bulbs. I also felt another presence behind me, something cold and malevolent. It was making the same scratching sound I had heard earlier, louder though. In fact, it was as loud as the breathing of the hag on my chest, and I swore I felt scratching on my head. There was pain, but not like normal pain. It felt real, but also not. It was almost as if I could see it rather than feel it. I could not fight anymore, and I gave up and let her suffocate me. But then it all stopped. I opened my eyes fully and sat bolt upright in bed. I breathed deeper than ever and slowly drew my hands up to feel my neck. Nothing. I hastily looked around the room and all I saw was darkness. I was alive. It was so strange. A second ago I was about to die and now I was fine. I remembered everything and it was definitely not a dream. It was half and half. I've had similar experiences since, though not for many years. But life has never been the same since. I mean, every time I close my eyes, I picture that same scene. I don't know whether it was real or not, and I don't think I'll ever have any way of knowing. But what I do know is that that sense of evil I felt was the worst thing anyone could ever endure. And I hope to God that it never happens again, though the possibility is always going to be there. It's an odd thing to be afraid of the past, isn't it? Sweet dreams. I had a nightmare earlier this week. I say nightmare, but I realize now it was more like a vision of the horrors yet to progress. I was alone in my house, like I am every day of the week, because my mum has to go to work. My best friend Immy was meant to be coming around for the day, so I sat in my room waiting for her. It wasn't long until I peered out my bedroom window and noticed her mum's car parked outside my drive. I then heard 3 loud, deliberate knocks on my front door. Assuming it was Immy, I proceeded to chuck my keys out of the window for her to unlock the door and let herself in. However, as the person I'd let in was walking up the stairs towards my room, Immy was only just walking up my drive. I realized my fate and sat on my bed waiting to be confronted by the unknown entity. I began to cry, my heart pounding in my chest. The entity reached my bedroom door just as Immy reached the front. I heard her knock desperately and shout my name, as if she knew I was in danger. The doorknob from my room began to twist, slowly. It clicked open, and the door began to widen. I saw it, but it was not what I expected. I thought I would have witnessed a grown man with a weapon of some sort, but no, this thing was nothing of reality. This thing showed no compassion, no mercy. It just stared straight at me, as if right into my soul. I began to choke with fear while still crying. It rose, its long, skinny, shadowy fingers to its gray, thin, blood-stained lips and simply told me to shush. I was stricken silent with fear. I could still hear Immy's desperate bangs and calls of my name, but they seemed to be getting quieter, more distant. The entity was taking me away from reality, making me distance myself from sanity and the ones I love. It stepped further into my room, and I began to notice in more detail what the entity looked like. It wasn't much taller than me, though much skinnier, inhumanly skinny in fact. Its face was something not of this world. Eyes, non-existent, only deep black holes like gateways to eternal slumber and death. Hair as gray as storm clouds that reached the floor and draped over each shoulder, covering most of its body. I could no longer hear Immy. Whether she had given up, gone to get help, or if this was the work of whatever was now at the foot of my bed was unclear to me. It stared, just stared, and I stared back in pure silence. It moved so quickly towards the side of my bed as if it had jumped or teleported. T was now within reaching distance of me, its face less than 2 feet away from mine, but still, all we did was stare until its face seemingly began to melt. Its whole face elongated, its lips disappeared and jaw opened wider and wider, revealing the most disgusting, rotting, sharp teeth. I realized this was it as the entity let out a shrill noise, nothing to ever be made by human, animal, or even machine, and lunged for my neck. I woke up. Like I said before, I said nightmare, but no. I realize now it was a vision. A warning perhaps, or maybe I was just made to be frightened before its arrival. Now, as the person I let in is walking up my stairs towards my room, Immy is only just walking up my drive. I know it's time. I know this is reality. But there's no harm in wishing that I wake up again.